I liked when he did that, and I like to remember it now. I felt reassured, content. Bound to me, he belonged to me. We formed a block. But if a fellow worshipper joined us, my suddenly useless hand was returned to me. Did my father have any idea of how much that hurt? I felt abandoned, even rejected, and after that, it was never the same. I admired my father, feared him and loved him intensely. He in turn genuinely loved all people, the weak, the needy, even the madmen. He enjoyed listening to them as they laughed, sang, wept, and chattered with birds they alone could see. Beggars were drawn to him, and he never failed to invite them to share our Shabbat meal. My father enjoyed considerable renown in the community. People turned to him for advice. I was not surprised that he was so sought after, but I never understood fully why he had time for everyone but me. Now I wish he had told me of his childhood, of his studies and experiences. What about his father, whose name I bear? My paternal grandmother talked of him often and always with a smile, but that wasn't the same. I can see Grandma Nissel now, with her pale, thin face framed by the black scarf she never seemed to take off, and her eyes. I remember her eyes. When she gazed at me, she must have seen another Eliezer. To smile at me was to smile at him. Friday was our special time. I would stop and see her on the way home from Cheder. Eliezer, my child, come, I'm waiting for you. She would call out from her window. She would give me fresh buns from the oven and sit and watch fondly, her hands folded, happy and at peace, a glimmer in her blue-grey eyes as I washed and recited the appropriate prayer. Do me a big favor, will you, grandmother? I asked during one of our weekly meetings a Friday in June. Ask me for the secrets of the forest, and I shall lay them at your feet, she said, her voice soft and tender. Ask me for the world and its riches, and they are yours. I had never heard her speak so many words at once. No, I stammered, embarrassed. All I want is for you to tell me about grandfather. Her face darkened. Why? Just because, since I'm named after him. She was silent for a long moment, her eyes wandering in the distance. Your grandfather, my child, your grandfather. How can I explain it? He loved God and his Torah. He never lived apart from or outside God, apart from or outside the Holy Torah. From morning to night, even at the store, his nose was always buried in the holy books. I sometimes wonder if he even noticed me. There was no rancor or complaint in her voice. On the contrary, she seemed proud and happy to have been married to such a pious man. But what about you, grandmother? Did you notice him? Constantly. I would watch to be sure he was well and lacked for nothing, to make sure his shirt wasn't torn or his kaftan didn't need mending. When he smiled, his light brightened my darkness. When he sang, the whole world answered him. Shabbat with him was paradise. The house and garden were bathed in an indescribably heavenly purity, and I could hear angels singing with us in his honor. I wonder if I was worthy of it, but I felt elevated, yes, elevated to the divine throne. I knew that grandfather Eliezer had been killed in World War I, not far from our city in a savage battle. A stretcher-bearer, a medic, he was trying to help a wounded man. When they told me, my grandmother said, I learned what catastrophe meant, and I knew my mourning would never end. Motionless, her hands still folded, she began to weep in silence, tears flowing down her cheeks and disappearing into the knot in her scarf. I stared at her, as though transfixed. Remember, little one, she finally whispered. Remember the name you bear. Try not to dishonor it. Many years later, when I returned to my town, I went to the cemetery in search of my grandfather's grave. The stone, overgrown with weeds, loomed over its neighbors, but it was hard to decipher the inscription. An emotion I had never felt before took hold of me. I saw Grandmother Nissel again, and her words echoed in my memory. I recited a psalm and began to talk to the man whose presence had sanctified a small piece of the universe. It's me, grandfather. Yezer ben Shlomo ben Eliezer, your grandson. I would like to say Kaddish for your soul's salvation, but there is no minyan, I am alone. But I would like to tell you of the man who bears your name, that you might judge whether he is worthy of it. And since you are with Grandmother Nissel again, say hello to her for me. Tell her I remember our Friday visits. I remember her bonds and her smiles and silences. And I began to weep as she once had, like a desperately hungry child who would always remain hungry. A moment later I went on. If Grandmother had a grave, I would go to the ends of the earth to visit it, but as you know, she doesn't. Did you know, Grandfather, that she expected that? Did you know, Grandfather, that Grandmother Nissel was the only one in the family, almost the only one in the whole community, who guessed it all? She knew she would never come home. She left this wretched town in her funeral dress. Yes, she wore her shroud under her black dress. She alone was ready. In the train, she alone was silent. Am I worthy of her silence, Grandfather? The child within me refuses to let go of his grandparents, as the man I am refuses to be separated from his father. My companion, my judge, or simply my guide, he never leaves me. It is to him I turn at times of doubt. Fearing his verdict, I seek his approval. His encouragement is essential to me, and his reproaches hurt. How often have I changed course, solely in order not to disappoint him? I was hardly a model child. I complained easily. My concentration wandered. I spent too much time daydreaming with my friends instead of studying. I didn't eat enough, and my parents worried constantly about how thin I was and how pale. Lavish sums were spent, dragging me from doctor to doctor, city to city to treat my migraines. For the most part, I was not too bad a pupil. My tutors liked me. I learned my lessons, did my homework. Yet reading isolated me. My classmates were no longer beside me. I no longer saw or heard them, for I was elsewhere, in far-off kingdoms ruled by the word alone. Even my mother remained behind, as if on the far side of a river. To rediscover her at home was always a joy. But how could I ease that wrenching feeling that preceded my return? I found a solution. Take her with me. All I needed was determination. When I went to see Adam, Eve were my mother's touching face. When I followed Moses in the desert, his sister Miriam became my mother. Now nothing could separate us. Once, however, we made each other suffer. But the suffering came neither from her nor from me, but from Rabbi Israel of Vishnitz when he came to Sighet. I was 8 years old. As usual, my mother took me with her to seek the Rebbe's blessing, good health for her family, success and respect for the head of the family, good husbands for her daughters, fear of God for her son. A large crowd thronged the empty chamber, spilling out into the corridor and onto the street. As the daughter of Reb Dodje, my mother did not have to wait online. She, not the secretary, wrote her own request to the Rebbe, who talked with her about countless family matters as I stood holding my mother's hand, not understanding everything they said, focused as I was on the sweet and beaming face of this Rebbe, whose Ahavat Israel, love for Israel, and therefore for every being in Israel, was legendary. Suddenly the Rebbe told me to approach. He put me on his lap and asked me tenderly about my studies. I answered his easy questions as best as I could, stammering, almost incoherent. At which point the Rebbe asked my mother to leave us alone. Good, the Rebbe said when she closed the door behind her. Now we can speak calmly. We were alone a few minutes, or was it a few hours? At last he kissed me on the forehead and told me to wait outside. Tell your mother to come back, he said. When she re-emerged from talking with him, what seemed like days later, I froze.